Hello everyone, can you please be seated? We're going to get started with the mayoral debate, question and answers from the floor.
I've never been an owl.
If you wish to continue talking, you can go out into a quiet area. Got a really long cord here on the mic. I'm trying to unravel and look cool at the same time, and I'm never cool anyway. So I want to thank everyone for attending. Just got to get my... So just some ground rules for tonight's debate. We have been trying to live stream, that hasn't worked, but we will be videotaping the mayoral debate, and that will be posted. I'm not sure if live stream or after the effect. So be prepared that if you have any questions, you might be on Facebook, and to respect the candidates and the public. And this is a mixed venue with a variety of ages, and we would like to have that in effect as well. So each mayoral candidate will be allowed to select a person who supports their candidacy. Now, we've already been through that. If there were any vetting questions, I've talked to Everett Baker's person, and there's only two questions from the floor. Nothing has been brought in from the Facebook live stream, so that appears to be okay. If anyone would like to write questions down, there's pen and paper over there, and you can put it in the blue box, and I'll get Christopher or Ted, one of the other moderators, to bring it over, and we'll ask that for you if you don't wish to ask it. I'm just wondering if there is another mic out for the public. Is there left? There is not. So you'll have to speak very loudly if you're going to ask questions. So the three criteria for the questions are relevant to local political issues, respectful of the candidates, accessible to debate. Each mayoral candidate will pick one question at random to debate. We need one more question, please. We only have 2 questions. Otherwise it'll be very short.
Oh, there we go.
Each candidate will get 2 minutes to respond, followed by a rebuttal round of 1 minute each. This should allow for 3 debate questions in the time allotted. We started a few minutes early, but we're still fairly close to 7:30, so we'll see how many questions we get through. So I'm going to ask the first question. We recognize that there is a direct connection between the health of an individual and the policy of the individual's community. What do you perceive to be Grand Forks' greatest public health concern, and how do you plan to address it?
Okay, so let me just project here. I hope everybody can hear me. Actually, we've decided that we'd like to try it without the mic. Since you have to ask from the floor with your loud voice, we think we can project. All of us are used to being on stage. So, policies of the city. I would think that one of the great things.
I'm hearing someone say louder. Yes.
Maybe stand up. So one of the great things that Grand Forks offers are the recreation services that we're sitting in right now. I think those are the kinds of things that show the community the kind of healthy attitude that we have. I also point to the trails. We're becoming a pedestrian community where people are getting used to going places on the trails, using bikes and walking. I think those are the kinds of messages that we're sending out in terms of the health of our community. The things that have happened with the flood and all the trauma, yeah, I think that's really taken a toll in terms of individuals in the community. As far as policy goes, I think we're getting as much support as we can from City Council right now in dealing with some of these insurance problems, which I think I'm hearing are some of the worst things that are grinding down the mental health of the community, is having to wait for answers from government. So I think we offer a very healthy community with a great arts center. We have an arts center that we should all be proud of, that a lot of communities don't. And I think it's time that we had a community center built into this complex that we're sitting in now. All of the infrastructure is here, and although it'd be nice to build something on a lot somewhere that looks grandiose, I think this is the site where it's going to work best, where we can use the resources we have here and capitalize on that.
Well, I can tell you what people die of the most. That's helpful. You know, we do have a large percentage of our population that pass from cancer, and I think that is a concern. I think getting transportation to treatment. I think we have a phenomenal hospital. I will tell you that. We have great nurses, we have great emergency room. We are very fortunate in our city to have doctors that you can go and get new patients, because some of the other municipalities throughout the Belgrade and Milford are not that fortunate. So we have a good health system. I agree with candidate Taylor. We have a phenomenal recreational facility that we can take advantage of. You know, I have a grandson, and I watch him. You know, they spend time in video games, and you know, we want to promote health. We want to promote a healthy lifestyle, and I think we do have that potential here in Grand Forks. When we have new families come, one of the things that we can offer is our recreation of the mountain, the Phoenix Mountain, the golf course, the Christina Lake thing, the trails that we have here are really phenomenal, and the lifestyle. You know, we do have a very relaxed, a lot of times, lifestyle that we can offer to our families. So yeah, but we, you know, if you were asking what the health issues, then yes, cancer is certainly is peripheral and one of the leading causes of death in our community.
So I'm kind of of the mind that community is dependent on its amenities. That's why people actually come here. We don't come here because we've got 3 coffee shops or that we can buy our shoes here. We come because we want to engage with each other on many levels. And the amenities that we have that support community are what actually bring us together. Even from an economic development standpoint, if companies are looking to site their businesses, often they will look at the social and cultural aspects of what the community has to offer, because it's what people do outside of the jobs that they work at that cause them to live together. And if you can't enjoy what you do outside of the time you spend at work, you're not a happy person. And what we need are happy people. And that is really indirectly the biggest health concern, is to create an environment and a community where we enjoy each other, we enjoy the time we spend here, and the happier a person is, the less likely they're going to get ill. I mean, it's like tending a good garden. You want to keep your plants healthy so the pests don't get at it. That's coming from my pest management perspective. But you know, keeping a healthy garden, keeping it watered and keeping the soil rich, that's what promotes a good plant health and keeps the pests away. One other thing I would like to note is that air quality has been a continuing issue in Grand Forks for a long time. And what I would like to see is a dialogue open with Rolly Russell, the area director, on open burning practices. As we have a burn ban in the city of Grand Forks, and we are looking out for our folks with breathing issues. Michelle Kasky certainly knows all about that. It can't be that on the west side of Spraggett Road or North Fork you can burn, and then on the other side you can't. We need to work together for our mutual health, and so that's the 2-minute mark.
Thank you. Thank you. Now each candidate gets 1 minute for rebuttal. I'll leave that up to you to decide who would like to go first. Do you all agree on that one?
Please write that down somewhere. Oh, Les has got that on camera. We're agreement.
The next,
Sorry, just to add one point here, I think that part of the question that all of three of us didn't answer that clearly was the policies of the city that promote that health that we're looking for. I think that's what they were driving at too. And I see that healthy attitude coming from the city. We've had councillors before that were advocates of changing the way we behave in the city, and I think our pedestrian corridors have shown that we've really moved to a community that appreciates good health. The exercise thing that was put in here at the rec center, things like that. I mean, people coming into town looking at that and saying, you're a healthy community.
I agree. Hard to rebut that.
Okay, that's
makes sense.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, next question.
so you're good, and you wouldn't like to add anything to that? You're all good?
We're good.
Okay. The next question is, views about the proposed community center. How would that affect the community to have one? I'm just adding that last part as a word. The benefits? And has anyone looked into the cost? I'm adding that just to see if anyone has any ideas. So just being above the board there.
I'll take. I am a strong opponent of community center. Community is effective when we can when the community can come together. We saw that during the flood, this became the hub. This was our community center, and obviously, Community Futures now have received a funding to do a study. I realize it's a study, and I'm sure that there's probably 35,000 of them in City Hall in some drawers that we could probably bring out and dust the dust off them. I know it's not going to be. I know it's going to be expensive. We know that. That's a given. And how we go about achieving the funds to get it will need to be a discussion, obviously. But I know from just folks that want to be able to have a funeral that's not in a church. We're very limited in where we can host it. A reception or a function. Christina Lake has one. It doesn't just seem, it doesn't seem logical that we not have one. Midway has one. So, and I have talked about it on Facebook, and some folks have said it'll never happen. It can't happen. It can't happen. Well, unfortunately, I don't live in the nevers, so I think it can be possible if we come around and make it a focus, and I will certainly promote that within our council and talk to City Hall about it and see what can we do. It obviously is an important issue, and I agree. We need a community center. 100% agree.
So, yes, I agree that we need a community center as well. Of course, it is always the question of money. There was conversations about having it here, tied to this facility. I think there may be issues with that simply because of the age of the building and knowing that when you open something up, you tend to open up the worms that come with it. So, the age of the building, I think, would be problematic. I also know that, if you put a $3 million price tag on something and say it's going to be done in a year, you're looking at $7 million in 2.5 years. So we have to be very cognizant of what the cost benefit would be to having something built here and attaching and opening up the walls and whatnot, or to build on a new site, something fresh. So in terms of where the money comes from, well, I think we live in a culture of scarcity, and so we tend to focus on things like what we don't get, like CBT money or gas tax money, or the culture of scarcity is just a frame of mind, I think. I know that there's the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that has a fund called the Green Municipal Fund, and they use that fund in order to support the remediation of brownfields, old gas stations. And we have 2 of them just on the other side of 19th there that could be remediated, and there's your site for a community center with money that is used and earmarked specifically for those kinds of projects. I think it's just a matter of redirecting our gaze from the usual suspects in terms of funding and being creative and looking for other partners.
And once again, I totally agree that that's the direction we need to go. The last effort that we had in Grand Forks to do a community center ended up being passed around between different groups, and we ended up, I think, with a budget of about $5.5 million. It was totally undoable. We weren't looking at grants. We were looking at what would be the ideal, what would be the dream thing that we could do. I think we have to get down to a very practical level. Yeah. We need to understand, though, that community centers are not self-supporting. The only way you can sort of argue a self-supporting part to a community center is if we had a hotel chain, we could have some minor conferences, we could use the community center as part of that economic growth that it would give us if we had a place to go and to have these kinds of conferences. But I think we need to be really cautious right now in terms of going forward, that we don't burden the city with additional taxes, and that we look at grants over a period of time. But number one step is to get the feasibility study for this particular site finished with Community Futures, and then we can start to shop for grant money. But we're going to have to budget for operating costs because it will not be self-sustaining.
I gather you all agree on that?
Yeah, I could add.
Okay, Ed, yes, go ahead.
So, you know, and I think this is an extension of what you were saying, is that it has to be multifunctional. It has to serve many purposes. So it has to be, you know, something that, you know, you can have theater in, that you can have conferences in, that you can have, that it actually accommodates a wide plethora of different functions that in some cases generate revenue.
Right, but again, that process of looking at multiple, used by multiple groups is what ended up with the $5 million budget.
Yeah, that's true. So I mean, it has to be pragmatic.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Anything else to add? Good on that topic? Okay. And the last official question written down. We recognize that there is a lack of available resources for low-income, homeless populations within Grand Forks. And then there is in brackets, no homeless shelter / soup kitchen. How do you plan to address this issue? And I will pass the question to the table.
Well, what? What the food bank? We'll take the food bank first. If you read my platform, one of the things that I wanted to get quite soon is Mayor's Task Force on homelessness, mental health, and addiction. My thought is that we would bring the various pillars together, sit around a table. The mayor would chair this task force to show the importance of it, and we would look at what we could do here on a local basis and be homegrown. When Betts was going to be closed in February, and homeless people being put out in the street, I was absolutely appalled. I got on the phone to the MLA and I said, "You're not going to believe what they've just done." It was, to me, absolutely heartbreaking. And I think that, and then of course they got the extension, which I was pleased about. But just to, homelessness, you just cannot paint a brush over it and say it's going to be gone. It's just not that simple. It's a complicated issue. I see it throughout the boundaries of Milkameen. Every community is battling with it. And so, you know, and I as the president of the food bank, I see the folks that come in to our facility, and so we need something. What I would have liked to have happened is back before this kind of all fell apart on us, is have the city come together and have some other proposals, but they didn't, and I don't know the reasons why, and only they can answer to that. But you just can't you know, it's with the old bulldoze and it'll go away. Well, that's obviously not happened. You know, we've probably lost a few. Brian and I were having a discussion about that the other day, about bets and the numbers, and then the BC housing that's being built, or projected to be built downtown. Would that actually meet the needs of our community, or is that just
the 2-minute mark?
Okay, sorry.
So the sad story of Beth's is that we vacated the premises and it was torn down in the spring. What we're looking at there is that before Beth's folded its tent, we had approached the city and BC Housing to look at a smaller approach to this type of need in the community. First of all, BC Housing said they're not providing emergency shelters anymore, so we were pretty much obsolete. But they were willing to look at another development, which we had looked at a site and it was leaked to the public, and that got them all upset. But that was on 2nd Street at 68th. We had looked at those 2 or 3 lots that are in there that the city had some ownership of, and we were looking at about an 8-bed unit in that spot that would allow us to grow over a period of time and to operate maybe in 2 or 3 locations in town as the need was developed and as the demand grew, that we would decentralize it and not have it all in one place. We actually nicknamed their proposal to us as the Gulag. The kind of thing that BC Housing is facing us with is that they see an economy of scale here. We see a community. They've been looking at 50 beds, not only in the area that we're looking at now, but all across the health sector. Building for seniors. Rod Gustafson's battle over at Broad Acres had to do with the government coming along and saying, okay, yeah, you got 17 beds, now we need a minimum of 40. So, you know, they've had this sort of push on to provide a certain size because they feel that that's an adequate size. I think it's a mistake, and Beth took a real hard stand on that before it folded, saying, okay, no emergency shelter, but if we're going to have a home program like a Housing First program or something, let's start it with that 8 beds down on the far end of 2nd Street. And so, you know, we were on top of it at that point.
That's the 2-minute mark.
Thank you.
No, Gary.
Oh, sorry, Gary. Thank you for keeping me in check.
Just last June, for those who don't know, I'm president of the Phoenix Foundation, which is a philanthropic organization that covers the Boundary. And I had an opportunity in June, actually recommended by Dara Sutton, who until a couple of months ago was the Boundary Women's Coalition executive director, who was homeless 5 times while she was living here, and is now actually living back in Medicine Hat, doing a job there. So I went to this event that was sponsored by the Tamarack Institute, which is a national foundation, which is looking to address poverty. And so we became, as the organization, Phoenix Foundation, became a member of Cities Reducing Poverty. Is anyone familiar with the federal Canada First poverty reduction strategy? Well, there is one, and it just came out. And the Tamarack Institute, now the Phoenix Foundation, have signed on as partners in trying to alleviate poverty in all its forms. So not just homelessness, but drug addiction, crime, and all those attendant issues that come from poverty. Homelessness just being one of them. So that is, you know, I understand Everett's idea of the mayor's task force. I think there's already an adequate system in place, and that we just have to avail ourselves of better structure that's already out there. The Tamarack Institute is huge, and with Canada trying with its strategy is looking to reduce by 20% poverty, reducing poverty by 20% by 2020 and 50% by 2030. Those are pretty noble goals, and it's not going to be done alone. It's going to take communities like Grand Forks or the Phoenix Foundation to get on board and really push this forward. So I think we're on our way.
That's perfect timing. Now a chance for follow-up and rebuttal.
Well, Everett.
Yes. Brian?
Well, I guess assuming that BC Housing is going to go ahead with this project on 2nd Street,
Yeah.
how would you work to ensure that it operates in a fashion that doesn't diminish the quality of life in the downtown core?
Well, as I've said quite publicly before, I'm opposed to it. I'm opposed to the size and I'm opposed to the location. That has not changed. They have obviously came out with a revised timeline and a revised version of it. So I can only go by what I've seen, what was delivered to the businesses downtown at this stage, besides what we know that they're willing to change. I think I have some hope that they're willing to have a discussion, and in that sense, maybe we can convince them that there might be another location. I know they've been around and looked at a few and have turned it down, but that's now what will happen then. At least they're not going to shovel us in the ground in January, so it gives us a little bit of time to address them. I think, again, face-to-face is the best way to do it, and so I'm hopeful that we can change it. You know, they say it's going to cost, what, $1 million a year to operate. That's a quite an extensive amount of money. Please give us that so we can build some seniors, you know, some housing.
That's the 1 minute mark. Sorry to interrupt.
So I've been asked this as well, what my position on it is. And I've just found at this point, not enough information has been provided by BC Housing. How do they come up with 48 units? Why did they pick 2nd Street and Central? Like, there's information there that should be made available so that we can have a cogent and discussion about what the rationale is. And that's what I don't understand, is what the rationale is. I mean, yes, we obviously need some supportive housing, but why 48 units? Why that location? Again, it's just a lack of information that's been supplied to anybody, for that matter, to actually make a reasoned decision about what it ought to be.
So you're in agreement, though, that we're being pushed by the efficiencies of scale here that they're seeing in having 50 units in that site.
Yeah.
Would you agree that if we could decentralize it, it might be nice not to have it all in one place?
I am so in favor of scatter sites. The idea that my whole thing here is, you know, building BC's biggest neighborhood. That's what I would like to see. We can't, you know, keep isolating people and trying to push them into the margins and expect us to engage each other, because that we're separating each other, we're dividing each other, and that's not the way to raise a community.
Well, and you're absolutely right, Brian. It is, you know, they build that down there, you might as well put a big bullseye on the side of that building, because that's exactly what it's going to be. It needs, in my opinion, the 8 or 9 that Bets had suggested, to bring them into a community, that's the right way to do it. Not to build a monstrosity downtown, and then move them in there and put a huge target on them. Here we are, here's what we are. That does not build community, and it will just affect the downtown businesses. It's not the right thing. I understand why. You know, BC Housing, as you all know, they got a plan, and that whether it's here in Chilliwack or somewhere else, this is 50. You know, they got a what, 2,000 of them built. The government says
2,700
built, and so they said great. So typical government, they deliver it on a Friday afternoon because they're urban thinkers, and they think, oh well, we'll deliver it on a Friday. By the time that gets around the water cooler on a Wednesday, people have forgotten about it. And then, of course, we're in the middle of a municipal election. What a better time to drop it on the doorstep.
That's the 1 minute mark.
Sorry.
That was a wonderful.
So again, best looking at it, we didn't agree that it would cost more to run the gulag than it would to have 2 or 3 decentralized sites, because you're able to break those down into groups of people that are going to get along with less supervision and support if you break down the population. So rather than look at a new Gulag site, possibly we could be pushing them to reconsider again the idea of decentralizing the approach that they're taking.
Having a different model. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Please take note that we are agreeing here. Just in case anybody has any questions? Hallelujah, Ted.
Is that your final discussion?
That's it.
Okay. We're going to offer to the floor, if there's anyone else from the public that would like to ask a question that hasn't had a chance to do so, please do so now. Okay, please, can you just state your name and your question? Thank you.
My name is Gene Hortz, and I got a supplement question. It's regarding the community center. In Christina Lake, they've got a combination of a community center plus a welcoming center. Now, if we had that here in Grand Forks, that would make it possible for local musicians, local artists to put their products and their artwork and everything like that, and develop it into something that is used by people that visit this town. And like in Christina Lake, people drop money there all the time at the welcoming center. If they go there to watch a musician play, they're spending money on coffee and treats and things like that. So there's always an income coming in, and it comes in pretty handy. So I'm just wondering if Grand Forks would have the same kind of proposal to not just make it a community center, but also a welcoming center for people who are traveling through Grand Forks. And that way, the word gets around, Grand Forks is a pretty neat place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Point taken.
Yeah.
Well taken.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Would you like a rebuttal, or you're okay to move on to another question?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Anyone else
Disagree with
would like to ask a question? Yes, please stand and state your question and name. Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you for talking to all of us tonight. My name's Ty Wright. I just wanted to ask, you guys have mentioned a lot about the housing situation, having it centralized downtown or having it sort of dispersed within the community. Either way you cut it, these are same people or similar people who are going to be using other services in the community. Transportation. As we know right now, there are no forms of transportation, buses, or I've heard there's one taxi. I'm not. Yeah. So, do you have any positions on transportation or any ideas to make transportation more accessible in Grand Forks?
I talked to kind of an idea that evolved out of one of the community conversations I held, was the idea of a rideshare. When I did a residency for some education I was taking on Bowen Island, of course, has got I think 121 dead-end streets, and one way on and off, right, the ferry. So what they've set up is essentially a rideshare. So they've got light bus stalls where they've got a sign with a thumb that's like this, and if you need a ride, you stand there and you wait, and somebody comes by who's going to the ferry, and you catch a ride, and it works really, really well. I think there's potential for doing something similar here, especially to help youth get around, because youth find, I know this from the Vital Signs report that the Phoenix Foundation puts out, is that youth are having a terrible time connecting with their friends and their peers across the boundary region. And something simple, if we could set this up where you've got vetted drivers, a program that you establish and set up so that, we can establish regular routes and have stations where people can stand and hope for a ride. So I think there's some or low cost ways that we can address that.
So another issue for me has been the fact that Handy Dart is effective for a narrow group in the population. And to me, that group are people who are seniors, who are looking at medical problems, and a lot of younger people who have a right to use that service don't use it at all because it doesn't seem appropriate for them to get on the bus with a bunch of seniors going to an appointment. So I think we need to look at some more creative approaches, as I suggested there, and how we can move people around and give them opportunities without running the cost up. We found in running the service from Greenwood to Grand Forks for a period of time, that it would have been cheaper for us to buy a car for the 2 people that were
Right.
going from Grand Forks back and forth. So, you know, those are cost things that we really need to be practical about. But I think in the town here, an idea such as ride sharing or Uber or things like that really have to be looked at.
I agree with the 2 gentlemen. We were discussing that today at the food bank, because we have many folks that come out, and right now they take their bicycles and or wagons and things, and where it's located, and to look at where they live in the wintertime, that's not going to be very practical. So we need to find ways to make it convenient for our clients, and that certainly is, you know, that transportation. Look at, we've got no, you know, Greyhound is gone, you know, and I use Greyhound quite a bit when I go to Vancouver in the winters to save me driving, and that's, you know, that's negated now. So you know, transportation is certainly an extremely important topic that, you know, that certainly the councils should be discussing right across the boundaries of Milton.
We're going to allow for one quick question, and then we will have the media if they wish to ask questions. We are currently at 8:01. We started at 10 after 6, so we can go for another 10 minutes if everyone is agreeable. Okay.
So what is your opinion about the flat people, and you think you can make it faster, make it progress faster, or something like that? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest frustration is the slowness of the system for all the flood people waiting to hear back from. So they're trapped between their insurance companies who heard about the buyout and are now trying to hold back to see what the government is going to do. And I know that the insurance companies are really abusing their position at this point, and they are being held to task by the Insurance Bureau, but that's not enough. I think that we've really got to look out for our citizens that are being forced into this bind and made worse by the fact that we're not getting answers from government.
Yeah. So it's just lobby, lobby, lobby.
Yeah.
Get this.
You know, loudest wheel, squeaky wheel.
Yeah.
You know, and good, strong representation on the regional district from our city too.
Yes.
That's got to be that's got to be priority, because these are our citizens, folks, that are affected.
I've also made a commitment, if elected as mayor, that I would work towards getting on the AKBLG as a director to voice our local issues in Grand Forks on that larger table, and then also to work at getting on the UBCM to talk about rural issues in British Columbia. So those are 2 commitments I would make in addition to serving as your mayor.
We'll now open it to the media if they would like to ask questions, whether they would like the mic or not a mic.
No, I'm good over here.
Okay.
Thank you. So a question for all the candidates to debate regarding economic development. We're facing legalization on Wednesday, and a lot of towns are seeing this as a major economic opportunity for their towns. But in the last 4 years, our council has taken a fairly conservative approach, I would say, to cannabis and cannabis regulation in our town. What do you feel is the role of the City of Grand Forks in encouraging economic development through cannabis, and how do you balance that with the other values of the city?
Well, first of all, I think the city made a mistake in setting up the zoning the way they set up the zoning, where 2 or 3 companies right now are moving into locations which may or may not be acceptable to the community, but because the city had gone ahead and set up these zoning regulations, these companies are comfortable moving into these zones for future operations. The way it could have been handled would have been to not allow any cannabis operations within the city at all. That would force operators to come forward and ask for a variance to be located in any location in the city, which means we could avoid a lot of the bylaw issues and zoning issues, but would have total control over where these operations ended up being located. The final thing I have to say about the economic development thing is that we've been passed over by 2 or 3 major companies who found Grand Forks is not suitable to them. And one of the big things that has come up over the last little while is a piece in our set up for a 100-meter setback on cannabis operations within industrial, light industrial, and commercial, some of the commercial zoning. So that setback has sent companies out of Grand Forks to the regional district to operate.
That's the 2-minute mark.
My opinion is I'm a free enterpriser, and I believe that it belongs in the hands of small business. It does not belong in the hands of government. Anything government touches, well, we know. ICBC, BC, the list goes on. I think it belongs in the hands of the free enterprise. As long as it meets the zoning and the licensing requirements, I believe that's the way it should be, because ultimately, the business owner, if your product is not qualified or not good, your customer service is no good, you won't be in business very long. And that's my opinion on cannabis. It's the liquor store is a prime example. You walk in there and they treat you poorly, they're going to be open tomorrow. Where if you're in a small business and you're not serving your customer well, you're not going to be in business. I also got speaking of economic development, I did receive a report. It's a 2018 Grand Forks Economic Disaster Recovery Program, and in there is some phenomenal recommendations for downtown economic growth, and talks about helps and websites and things that I think it's an excellent report. If you get a chance, it's online, you can have a chance to read it. It's a very, very good report, and I think there's a lot in here that we could adopt moving forward without a great deal of cost as well. Thank you.
When I was on council, I was actually myself and Councillor Bob Kendall. We were members of the BC Economic Development Association. So that is the association, the large BC-wide association. And as it turned out, we were the only 2 politicians on that body. Most of them were economic development officers. So yeah, we had a chance to do some pretty good stuff in getting the Grand Forks name out, and I think that is where we need to go back to, is to be a part of that association to make sure that what Grand Forks is and has to offer is top of mind. And that's anything about economic development, is trying to get your community top of mind. So it's about building a strong marketing package. For instance, BC's biggest neighborhood, that might work a little bit. But again, it's getting top of mind in the places that we need to be.
Is the rebuttal period necessary? We want to get in as many questions. Okay. Kathleen Taylorwood, you're good. Anyone else? Les Johnson, media. Anyone want to ask a question? Sorry. Okay, we have another question from the floor, and then we will have to call it a night. It is 8:08 right now.
Okay, the last time our community worked together, we created a sustainable community plan. I believe it's still in effect. And as I recall, what the community decided was they weren't looking to grow per se. People were attracted to Grand Forks and moved here. The way they wanted to grow was to increase tourism. They actually liked living in a smaller town. So my question of the candidates is, are you going to be trying to attract that kind of growth in tourism? Or are you actually wanting to increase the population? Or are you going to check in with the community to see, well, what do they want at this point in time? Are they still wanting to live in a smaller town that's doing well? Yeah. Or are they really wanting to grow like the communities, I think, that they left?
Go ahead. So as I mentioned earlier, the Phoenix Foundation has put out these reports called the Vital Signs reports. So we actually do these every 5 years, and it's sort of a snapshot as to 11 indicators within the community that like transportation, the gap between rich and poor, economic development. There's 11 characteristics that are examined under this Vital Signs report. So that, and it's actually coming up due in 2019, will be our next report. So I think it is a really good opportunity for the Sustainable Community Plan to relook at it, to use some of the data that will be coming in to support whether or not our community believes in which way we'd like to grow, so whether in size, in population, or in tourism, or what aspects we'd like to do that. It is, and because the Vital Signs is driven largely by surveys and respondents, there's a real opportunity to get the pulse of the community as we move forward in the next 4 years.
I don't see tourism as a focus of growth. I think what we're looking at here is that, yes, people will be attracted, and there are tourism opportunities in Grand Forks. We have great wilderness all around us. The tubing season's a little short, so you can't put that in brochures. But in fact, what we're trying to do is attract people who want to live in Grand Forks, who come here with employment or find employment here. I think our push to make employment opportunities available will be a greater determinant of growth than any focus on tourism that we have.
Yeah, I must agree with my two colleagues. You know, we have a wonderful community. I mean, we moved here. We chose this to be our home, this place to start our business. My kids, grandkids all live here. This is a great place, and a lot of it has to do with our people. You know, I run into people throughout the province, and one of the things I talk about, besides the borscht in Grand Forks, is the wonderful people that they meet. And you know, we do know we need to grow our tax base. We're going to lose a little bit, and the days of, you know, chasing the developers out with pitchforks probably are going to have to start to come to an end a little bit. But I appreciate the small town community. I do, because that's why we're here. And a lot of folks that are being pushed out of the big metropolis of Kelowna and Victoria. I know there's a family move from Victoria and Lower Mainland. They're selling their homes, making a very good profit, and they're coming here. And that's awesome. That's what we need to do. We need to grow. We need to grow, but we need to grow right. And that's one of the things that I've talked about with having coffee with the mayor. It seems I know some people think it's rather blasé, but I know other constituencies that do it, and it's been very successful. And I've sat with mayors that have done it, and it gives a form of community coming and talking face to face. And so that certainly, I think, is a discussion that we can have around the table. So.
Follow up? Is
Yes,
that
please.
okay? Yes?
Yeah, so one thing I would think we'd want to avoid is the drive-by economy, which is an economy driven by tourism alone. The fact that that TELUS has installed the fiber optic network here allows for a shift in what kind of economy is supported by this community. There's a large tech component. I know that as a real estate agent, that there are a number of people who have looked at Grand Forks now as opposed to then, because that they have that reliable technological pipeline to the larger centers. So people who would normally work in a cubicle in some office tower in downtown Vancouver can essentially come to Grand Forks and know that they can do their job in their own home and earn a good living, and then partake of our wonderful community in the lifestyle and the lower cost of living. So I think it's encouraging a shift in what we support in our economy.
That's the 1 minute mark.
There you go.
Anyone else?
We're good. We're good.
We'd like your feedback on tonight. What worked, what could be improved. This is the first time we've had this type of setup. Coffee bistro, one-on-one chat with candidates. Please leave your suggestions, or write a note there and put it in the blue bin over there. And yeah, we would definitely like feedback and see if this is something that people would like to have in the future. Thank you for coming and being such a wonderful, respectful audience, participating in questions. And to all the candidates, thank you and good luck.
Thank you all.